To the latest episode of Rod Martin Live. We're so glad that you're able to join us. As you're coming in, please leave in the comment area where you're watching us from, so that we know. We always get a kick out of seeing all the states and countries that are represented by the viewing audience here at Rod Martin Live. And if you're watching us on a replay, thank you so much. Please take the opportunity to share this with friends and family members and coworkers that need to hear the conservative viewpoint and the insights that you're only going to get right here at Rod Martin Live. We like to say that you can read about the world anywhere. You go to rodmartin.org to understand it. Today on Rod Martin Live, we've got a few topics to go over with Rod. We're going to be talking about the Dow's record run, and if we see a new record floor in our future. President Trump is actually taking action on Obamacare by pulling out a bailout. We'll cover that a little bit more. And the latest with SpaceX and our technology roundup. But this would be just another show if it were any other talking head, but we don't do that here. We bring you entrepreneur, futurist, and philosopher capitalist, the one and only, the most accurate analysis of the 2016 political campaign season, Rod Martin. How are you today, Rod?
Doing well.
You know, we're racing through the week, and while a lot of attention's getting on who's working and not working in the White House, there's one little thing that keeps coming across the ticker in all the business news, and that is another record Dow closing. Another record Dow closing. Another record Dow closing. We're inching up past 20,000. We thought that was impossible before President Donald J. Trump. Past 21,000. It looks like 22,000 may be the new floor, not the new ceiling. What is leading to all of this growth that we're seeing and reinvestment that's indicative of the Dow?
Well, it's important to understand. Floor is possible. Now, markets go up and down.
Yeah.
Duh. I mean, we built PayPal during the bust, so we know about that. And it took forever for the NASDAQ to come back up to where it had been in early 2000. So I'm not saying that we're going to stay at 22,000 forever, but the fact that we're at 22,000 is somewhat miraculous. And I have to tell you, I rarely agree with Alan Greenspan, and every time I've bet against Alan Greenspan, I've been right.
Okay.
And that's been true for 20 years.
So hold the presses.
But I agree with him today.
Okay.
Alan Greenspan said this week that there is a bubble, but it's not in stocks. It's in bonds. Interest rates have been held down far too low for, I think, increasingly problematic reasons. And the result of that is there absolutely is a bond bubble, and we don't know when that'll pop, but watch out. But equities aren't the problem, and I don't care how many talking heads on Fox Business or CNBC tell you otherwise. I don't care what Paul Krugman says ever for any reason, because he is a total idiot. But the fact of the matter is, equities are up because the market had priced in for years a continuation of the Obama-Clinton economy.
Okay.
This nightmare of creeping and increasingly galloping socialism, where you didn't build that, and where entrepreneurs are, if anything, the bad guy, and government is not just
the savior, the good guy.
The not the invisible hand, the entirely too visible thumb that you are under.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what has happened to the markets. Though the markets did rally back a good bit in the Obama years from the lows at the depths of the financial crisis several years ago. The fact is, they should have been this high already. This is a correction. You constantly hear about corrections.
Right.
This is a correction upward, because the entire market was compressed like a spring by the weight of this awful nightmare of Obama and Clinton's economic policies. When Clinton suddenly wasn't a factor anymore, it has sprung up 20% since November 9th, which is just miraculous. I mentioned Paul Krugman, every leftist's favorite Nobel Prize winning New York Times columnist, because the New York Times gets everything right.
And Nobel Prizes now are very, very rare, right? We had
Barack Obama got one 3 weeks into his presidency, a peace prize for doing literally nothing. They actually said this is aspirational. This is to encourage him on.
That's right.
Are you high? They should give you and me Nobel Peace Prizes for what we might do someday.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just insane. So yeah, not impressed. But Krugman said, and you probably remember this, but if you don't, Krugman said, leading into the election last year, that if Donald Trump won, the markets would literally never recover.
Right.
Never recover. And instead, we're up 20% since the 9th of November, which is just staggering. And I do think we're going up from here because that is based on strong earnings, the strongest earnings we've seen in years. That is based on the lowest unemployment rate, which is another way of saying incredible job creation since more than 10 years ago. Donald Trump is knocking it out of the park. We are seeing strong economic growth again. Throughout the Obama years, we were averaging 2% or less. 1 year, 1.6%.
We're supposed
GDP
to celebrate,
growth.
but we're supposed to celebrate 1.8 to 2% as the new normal.
The
Remember,
new normal. That's
normal.
right. Which is heinous. That means, think about it. The post-war average, and the war we're talking about for those of you from Rio Linda and those of you who are younger. The war we're talking about is World War II. So the post-war average since 1945 is 3% annual growth. And you say, well, what's the difference in that and 1.6? Well, only twice as much opportunity every single year for you.
That's right.
Twice as much job creation, twice as much innovation, twice as much money being created in the markets to make it easy for you to get a raise. And what we're seeing right now with 2.6%,
that's right,
and Trump's economic policies haven't even passed through Congress, we'll get to that in a minute, what we're seeing now is not irrational exuberance, as Greenspan once famously said years ago, but an exceedingly rational exuberance, a hope that you will get the kind of policy changes through Congress that we're working toward, particularly with tax reform.
Mm-hmm.
I still am hopeful for healthcare reform, but much more importantly, all of these incredible regulatory changes under Trump, he has been slashing and burning the Federal Register, and this has made it possible for companies to do business again, for startups to get going again, for liquidity in the markets to actually flow to the most productive people so that they can create jobs. And the older companies can give raises. Wages are at the highest level in memory. Again, unemployment's at the lowest level in a decade.
Let me ask you,
it's really incredible.
Let me ask you, is a lot of that, so we hear that this is an administration in chaos, that this is a president that hasn't had a huge accomplishment. Yet, in his first 100 days, he slashed $30 billion of excessive government regulation on companies. Keep that to our former president, Barack Obama, that it increased billions of dollars on regulations. Is that alone what is a huge catalyst? Or is it that being just a snapshot of what the market expects from policies once they pass through Congress?
Yes and yes.
Yeah.
And actually, I've seen estimates as high as $100 billion of effective tax on the economy. I mean, that Donald Trump has slashed in terms of removing regulations that were forcing them to spend or lose this money.
Wow.
You're also seeing, you may have noticed in press conference the other day, this administration is not talking about energy independence. It's certainly not talking about, and I stress this, Barack Obama ran in 2008 against drill, baby, drill, and all that kind of stuff you may remember from them. Barack Obama ran on, you can't just drill your way to lower gas prices.
Mm-hmm.
Go over there to that gas station and tell me you can't. That's insane. That was insane then. these people deny the existence of supply and demand. We are now the world's leading oil producer intermittently. Yes. We're just neck and neck with Saudi Arabia and Russia now. We are up double from the daily oil production that we had when Barack Obama became president. We've gone from 5 million barrels a day to 10 million barrels a day. Everyone believed we could never maintain 5 million, that we would only decline. You remember all the peak oil talk, you remember all of that. Fracking has been a revolution. The Democrats did everything they could to shut it down.
Absolutely did.
They did everything they could to shut down natural gas, which, by the way, if you agree with their position on global warming, you should be completely excited about, because natural gas has done more to reduce carbon emissions than any single thing that anyone has ever done. It's extraordinary. And so all of this has been bubbling up to the surface, and Donald Trump has been slashing the regulations on those industries, so that now we're not talking about you can't drill your way to lower gas prices, or in the 2012 campaign, Obama was talking about it is better to keep it in the ground.
Yes.
What kind of moron says that? Now, we're not even talking about energy independence.
Nope.
Donald Trump is talking about energy dominance.
That's right.
Energy dominance. Who ever imagined such a thing? Well, let me give you a little perspective. Until last year, it had been illegal, almost my entire lifetime, to export oil. Illegal. All of a sudden, we are producing so much oil because of technological innovation.
That's right.
We are producing so much oil, we are now meaningfully competing with Saudi Arabia, Venezuela, Russia. We are giving geopolitical relief to countries like Poland by being able to ship them natural gas and oil that they otherwise would be dependent on the Russians for.
And we saw that with coal in the Ukraine this week.
Yes, absolutely. It is transformative, and it means not only that we will make money on those exports, it means that we are not spending that money on imports. We are producing enough energy now to be able to completely transform that situation. So instead of constantly money flowing out of the country, now money is flowing into the country, and American workers are getting fantastic jobs at a high rate of pay doing the work of changing the world. It is a magnificent moment.
So we have an economy, as you said, spring-loaded, that is coming back. But a big driver of cost, what could make that spring a rocket for the economy, is healthcare reform and the repealing and replacing of Obamacare. We've been talking about this being out of the hands of the president and completely the responsibility of the United States Senate. And they have failed, and failed miserably. I will say Senate leadership, because there are great senators, like Senator Ted Cruz of Texas, that is actually working, Senator Rand Paul with the skinny repeal, actually working on amendments to make health care better. However, we find ourselves on the dawn of a recess. Senators are going back home. Some may hide, some may be very public. But this driving cost of health care has to be and can be solved. And the president, via his favorite channel to communicate directly with us, without the filter of the media, took to Twitter and said, maybe it's time that we eliminate the bailouts that Congress has and that insurance companies have with Obamacare. That tweet is more than a threat. That tweet is a terrific policy position, isn't it, Rod?
Well, let's rewind the tape just a bit. Since you and I have spoken, we had two major votes on health care, and as you know, there were 7 senators who voted against the 2015 bill that they had pretty much all voted for. Right. We have a list of those on my Facebook, and you should check that out if you haven't already. That was exceedingly disappointing. But when it came down to
senators
the final...
who lied, let's just call it what it is.
Senators who lied.
That ran and campaigned, their faces on TV ads and direct mail and media saying, repeal and replace. One senator in particular that said he would lead the fight to repeal and replace, actually led the fight for Democrats to keep Obama.
Yes, our dear friend John McCain. But let us be clear. On that vote, they were voting against a bill they voted for previously when they knew Barack Obama would veto it.
Right.
That is beyond shameful. That truly is a stab in the back.
Yeah.
On the second vote, last Thursday, we only lost 3.
Yeah.
And we expected to lose Collins. That's not a shock. Susan Collins, Rhino, Maine. But we did lose Murkowski and we lost McCain. And McCain was the deciding vote to give the day to the Democrats. Both of those people, Lisa Murkowski and John McCain, ran on repeal and replace, ran on the 2015 bill, promised that they would lead the fight against this. You need to understand clearly, folks, I want to tell you, getting angry in some diffused, nebulous way at the Republicans is not helpful. Nearly all the Republicans did right. The House passed a good bill back in May. It's not perfect, but given the constraints of the reconciliation rules in the Senate, it was probably the best bill we could get until we get a few more senators. They did their job. It took them a little while, but they did their job. In the Senate, it's not all of the Senate. It's not all of the Republican senators. It's not even Mitch McConnell. It's John McCain and Lisa Murkowski. Those people have to be dealt with. And since there's no good way to deal with them, I mean, McCain was just reelected, and I know it's very unfortunate. He now has brain cancer, and perhaps he will be replaced through an unfortunate means, and we certainly pray for the best for him. But nevertheless, the only way you're really going to solve this is to focus fire where it counts. You're not going to get rid of those 2 people in time to matter. What you could do is you could barrage them with phone calls, barrage them with emails, demand that they do what they're supposed to do, threaten their fundraising, do the things that have always been effective with politicians. And the bigger thing you can do is you can get out there and elect a Republican senator. In all of those seats, 25 seats up for re-election next year where a Democrat is currently a senator.
That's right.
The fact is, folks, twice in my lifetime, the Democrats have had a 68 vote majority. Barack Obama had a 60 vote majority. We always think that 52, 53, 54, 55, that's our high water mark. There's no such thing as a high water mark. All politics is local. And what we have is a whole bunch of Democrats up for re-election, very few of whom are all that popular, and many of whom are defending their seat in a state Donald Trump won.
That's true.
There's an opportunity for us to pick up a slew of seats, potentially 60, potentially even a few more.
However,
if we can do that, we can pass anything, and we will.
Can and should President Trump remove the exemption? Right now, Congress has a small business exemption keeping them from Obamacare.
Well, let me hit that because yes, again, and yes, Congress, get this, you're not going to believe this. You're used to Congress exempting itself from its own laws, which is heinous and awful, by the way. There are a few limited circumstances in which that's appropriate. But we need a constitutional amendment to make this unlawful. If Congress is going to put you under a law, it should also live under that law. Well, Congress went through the pretense to lie to you, to deceive you. And we're not talking about all of those congressmen together. No Republican voted for Obamacare. These guys, these Democrats you have now punished, voted for a law, Obamacare, that included a provision that applied Obamacare to them. And then they made a corrupt deal with Barack Obama who gave them an exemption, and they don't have to live under Obamacare. And the exemption is one that it's a waiver. It's in the discretion of the president, and it was designed for, as you pointed out, small businesses. How is Congress a small business? That's insane. It's just nonsense, and it is just virtually criminal that Obama did this, but he did it to buy votes, of course. And these guys were in on it because they absolutely intended to have their cake and eat it too, which they have had now for 7 long years. Donald Trump trying to give them the carrot, trying to negotiate, trying to get all these guys to do what they ought to do. He didn't say anything about it until they betrayed you.
Yep.
This past week, Donald Trump tweeted out that he intends to take that exemption away, and I bet he will. And if it were me, I'd guess that he'd probably do it while they're out on vacation.
He would.
And already you've got Democrat congressmen screaming about how terrible this would be if that tyrant Donald Trump were to make them live by their own law.
But Obamacare is fantastic, and so many millions of people are going to die if we take away Obamacare, yet they don't want to live with Obamacare.
Suddenly, these Democrat congressmen think that they will die if they have to live under Obamacare. That's exactly why Congress needs to live under its own laws. That's exactly why we need a constitutional amendment to achieve that. And Donald Trump needs to do what he has suggested he may do and take away their exemption, their waiver. Honestly, he may not have to do that. We may get to repeal and replace anyway. That isn't over. All of you thought that it was over when the House pulled the bill the first time back in the spring, and it wasn't over, and they passed a good bill.
They did.
You don't always want to watch the sausage being made. It's messy, and it will take some time, but I still believe we will get to some form of repeal and replace. That will also take a huge load off that spring, and you will watch the economy. You'll also see healthcare prices drop, and that is the way to make sure that everybody has coverage. The more people who can afford healthcare, the easier it is for us to take care of those who have to be in a safety net. That's just how it works. And let me add this.
Sure.
Paul Ryan has made clear that the immediate goal is tax reform. I don't necessarily disagree. I know it would be great to just pound on healthcare right now. Don't get upset with them if they don't. Tax reform would do more for this economy and more for real people than any other thing we can do. And we'll get to healthcare reform, but it's clear that the most important things we want to do are probably going to take more than 52 senators. They just are. Well, so we can make progress on that, but we need to get out to 2018 and pick up just a few more seats to be able to overcome the rhinos. We're not even talking about overcoming the Democrats at this point. We're talking about overcoming some rhinos. Yep. We can get there. We will get there. I'm convinced of it. But tax reform will be transformative. Donald Trump has put out a tax reform plan that frankly astonishes me in just how well put together it is. I've been a big proponent of tax reform my entire adult life. I've written and talked about it unendingly. What Donald Trump has done, particularly in extending a very meaningful corporate income tax cut from 15% from 35%. We are currently the most taxed of any country in the industrialized world. If you cut that to the 15% he's talking about, that's going to do wonders for job creation, earnings, economic growth, opportunity. We're going to have a job shortage. People are going to have so many opportunities, all the jobs won't be able to get done. That's not the point. The point is that Donald Trump didn't just do that. Even some of the Democrats agree with that. Donald Trump said, let's not just apply that to big corporations like even some of the Democrats are willing to do because they take money from those guys.
Sure.
Donald Trump said, let's extend that to mom and pop's grocery store.
That's right.
Let's extend that to the family farm. If you have a pass-through entity like an S corporation or an LLC or a partnership or a sole proprietorship, let's give you the same benefit that Exxon gets. That is going to do more to devastate the class warfare argument than anything ever, but it's also going to mean that anybody who can by any means work for themselves, even at a big company, if you can become a contractor instead of an employee, you're going to get what amounts to a 15% flat tax.
That's amazing.
That changes everything, and it will
is.
unleash a wave of entrepreneurship and innovation like nothing anybody ever saw.
Great.
But anybody who ends up paying those higher tax rates as an individual is just going to be an idiot. There is going to be a way for absolutely everybody to be at a 15% tax rate, and that will supercharge the American economy. We will have growth that is potentially greater than China's.
Well, we stand in a place where this next century could be another new American century, because America truly is stronger than most people think. And you want to make sure to hear about tax reform and technology and healthcare reform, and it's all in Rod's latest special report, The New American Century. You can get that by visiting rodmartin.org/NAC for New American Century. Or if you're listening or watching us via your mobile phone, you can text ROD Report, R-O-D Report, all one word, no spaces, to 33444. That's ROD Report to 33444, and we'll send you an immediate PDF version of The New American Century, why America will be stronger than you think. You know, Rod, there's a lot of things on the horizon. And one of the more popular parts of rodmartin.org is your Space News Roundup. And just really briefly, I know that SpaceX has canceled their Red Dragon. Tell us just briefly what's going on. And if you want more information, you can go to rodmartin.org and make sure that you subscribe so that you get the most read articles of the week, the Rod Martin Report, and the Space News Roundup. But what's going on with SpaceX?
Well, just very briefly, because we are at the end of the segment, but you need to know, this is really cool. Elon Musk has been talking for some time about Red Dragon, which is a Mars lander version of his manned Dragon spacecraft. He has not launched a man into space yet, but he's about to,
right.
and that's really looking good. That's going to be a phenomenal step forward for American industry, American jobs, and for the future of all mankind.
Absolutely.
The Red Dragon concept was to send a Dragon spacecraft with yay number of men, I'm tempted to say X number of men and women, probably 5 to 7 with their gear. It would land with, for lack of a better term, retro rockets would fire, and the capsule, the little conical capsule would actually land on the surface of Mars. They'd get out and explore, do their thing, and then lift off and go home. And all I can say is that would be an exceedingly cramped 10-month ride, but still awful cool. And no one's ever done that before, least of all the United States or Russia. So that's been kind of the plan. He's been talking about that for some time, and about actually sending at least an unmanned one to Mars and try it out.
Sure.
This week, and we're going to leave you on this note because it's really wonderful. Elon announced that he is canceling Red Dragon because, in his words, the ship I'm going to send to Mars is going to be vastly bigger than Red Dragon. Which, of course, evokes the video that he put out a while back of the giant reusable Mars ships that he intends to launch from just downstate at Cape Canaveral at Pad 39A. He has, as you know, because we've talked about it a lot and also on the site, great plans to settle as many as 1 million people on Mars by the latter part of the century. That is entirely feasible, technically and otherwise. Elon's take on it is that it's important that we not have all of humanity's eggs in one basket. What if an asteroid hits or whatever? But it's so much more than that.
Yeah.
To become a multi-planetary civilization would be possibly the greatest event in human history. It would transform our species in ways it's hard to fathom. It would expand our economy and our opportunities as individuals and as societies in ways that deserve far more time than we have. But crucially, and I can't stress it enough, it's here. It's here now. It's something that can happen and probably will begin to happen in our lifetimes. It's something we can be a part of. And that dawn of what will truly be the most exciting time in human history is really an extraordinary thing. And my hat's really off to Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and Richard Branson and all the guys who are putting their own money and their own lives into this effort to change the course of all of civilization. So anyway, this was kind of a big deal this week, and I was really excited about it. And I want to add just this to that. We will not only be covering this sort of developments at rodmartin.org, and Avilio mentioned our Space News Roundup, which is really good. It's every 2 weeks, and we hit a lot of things you're not really hearing about in the media that are extraordinary.
Yeah.
But this is a goal of the Martin Organization. We intend to launch a company in the not terribly distant future that will be part of this race to make humanity a multiplanetary civilization. So you're going to want to pay attention to that because we've got some big things coming.
Well, Rod, thank you. You know, it can be very easy to watch the mainstream media and to be down about the state of affairs in our country and in the globe and what the future has for us. And we are living in the greatest time in the history of the world. Technological advances and cultural advances. There are things from a faith perspective that are happening that are just downright incredible.
Not to mention the rapid eradication of human poverty in much of the world.
Yeah.
1 billion people lifted out of extreme poverty just in the last 20 years alone. And not a bit of that by socialism. All of that by freedom and human ingenuity unleashed by capitalism.
And I appreciate you bringing that perspective of encouragement and kind of tearing apart at the stories that people are hearing that are really guiding them down a path that's not in touch with reality. There's a lot of good that's happening. And there's a lot of good that comes out of some of the, political drawbacks that we may think are bad, but there's good that happens there. There's good in technology. There's good in the marketplace. Thank you for sharing that good. Thank you for encouraging us today. And I want to thank you for joining us. And make sure, hit like, hit hearts, share this, tag someone, a friend or a colleague that needs to get this insight, and make sure to visit rodmartin.org every day as there's something new and insightful that we're posting on the website, here on Facebook, and on Twitter. Well, on behalf of Rod Martin, I'm Avilio Silvera. I want to thank you for joining us, and we will see you next week.